Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, as the surah comes to an end, the Almighty warns the polytheists once again that the day of judgment that they appear to be denying will definitely come to pass. Now, the Jews, of course, already believed in the day of judgment, as well as the Christians. It was only the polytheists, the mushrikeen, who were in denial. So firstly, Allah informs them that if they are still in doubt regarding the message, simply because they cannot understand why would Allah send them a prophet after such a long span of time, when He has been sending multiple prophets to Bani Israel, then they should know that even Musa a.s. was sent to Bani Israel after a very long time. This message is in fact conveyed in verse 154 by the use of the word summa, more precisely over 400 years after Yusuf a.s. did Musa a.s. arrive as a prophet to lead Bani Israel to freedom. So the idea was, don't focus on the length of time between Ismail and Muhammad, peace be upon him. The length of time isn't important. It's the fact that a messenger has finally arrived with the Quran, a warning and a mercy for mankind. That is what they need to focus on. And if the question is still why did Allah send us a prophet? Then as explained in verse 156, it has been done so that the Arabs cannot complain that no message was ever sent to them. It was always sent to the two groups before them, in other words, the Jews and the Christians, and so that no Arab on the Day of Judgment can say, Allah, had it been sent to us, we would have done a better job of guiding other people. We would have done a better job of protecting the message and pleasing Allah more than anyone else. Therefore, now with the final warning and the clear evidence having been given, anyone who denies it or who turns away from it will have no excuse and no one to save him or her on the Day of Judgment. This, in fact, strongly negates the phrase, ignorance is bliss. Many people today argue that it's better to just not know, because once you know, you will be held accountable. If you simply don't know because you ignore the Quran and you choose not to learn it, then Allah cannot question you. So being ignorant is a blessing. Such arguments are simply a mockery of Islam. If you know the message does exist, but you're choosing not to study it, you're choosing to ignore it, you automatically become accountable as someone who has studied it but chooses not to follow it. Now, seeing the arrogance of the Arabs, Allah questions them in verse 158 by asking them, what exactly are they waiting for? Are they demanding that the Prophet bring them the Day of Judgment, the day that he promises is coming soon? But do they not realize that once the angels descend or the Lord appears, no soul will be able to benefit from having faith at that time because the doors of Tawbah will have closed. Only those who have believed before and who have done good deeds, they will benefit. For the rest, it will be too late. Now, although this is a message for the mushrikeen, for the polytheist Arabs, it equally applies to us. We spend our time complaining that we will do 5-time prayers eventually. We will study the Quran eventually when we get time. We will do good deeds when we are free from exams. But when making such statements, we automatically assume that we have plenty of time left. If not now, we can do it later. But who gave you any promise that you have plenty of time left? Who guaranteed you that you will be alive tomorrow? With no guarantees, why do we show such confidence in making future plans? Why can we not start today? What exactly are we waiting for? If we have understood from this surah that the Day of Judgment must come, it's inevitable, and we also understand what exactly is going to happen on that day, then what's left? Why the delay in making changes? How hard is it to start 5-time prayers today? How hard is it to add 5 minutes of tafseer into our daily lives today? How hard is it to smile, be kind to others, share our knowledge with others, help others to gain good deeds today? In addition, while some of us are too busy, immersed in this dunya, and we cannot be bothered to make any changes today, the rest of us are too busy bringing ego into religion. We spend so much time fighting each other and splitting religion into sects, even though Allah has clarified to the Prophet that he must not associate himself with those who split deen into sects, The only path is the path of the Quran and Sunnah. Now, of course, being a Makki surah, there was very limited Sharia at this time. The very basic morals, ethics, and principles were only being introduced. There were no extensive laws or rituals that had been explained. The Ummah did not even exist at this time. So, of course, we can ask this question that when the Sharia has not yet been introduced extensively and there is no Ummah, then when Allah warns in this verse not to split religion into sects, who exactly is He talking to? Don't forget the Jews and Christians already did exist, and they had split their religion into multiple sects. Even today, there are multiple groups within Judaism and multiple within Christianity. So the message being given is that the only religion from the beginning of time has been Islam. Later on, this was split into Judaism and Christianity, both of which were invented by mankind, not introduced by Allah. The Jews believe that they are right, the Christians believe that they are right, even though they both know that in reality, neither of them is right. Then the Jews have further split their religion into more sects, and the Christians have done the same thing, thereby introducing even more confusion. But of course, the question is this only talking to the Jews and the Christians? Do we not today do the same thing in Islam? Do we not focus less on analyzing what message is being taught and instead focus more on the sect of the speaker? We ask, do they belong to the same sect as us? If they do, then we blindly follow them. If they don't, then we question everything that they say, even if our heart testifies that what they're saying is right. So the message being given is very clear. Islam is the Quran and Sunnah. That is it. Try your best to follow it and pray to Allah that He guides you in the right direction every time. Worship only God, follow the way of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and strive to do good deeds for Allah. Every good deed for Allah will earn 10 times the reward on the Day of Judgment, and every bad deed will earn only as much as it should. Does this sound like a system that is biased against insan or in favor of insan? Does this sound like a system in which Allah is helping His slaves to make it into Jannah, or one in which Allah is just ready to punish His slaves and throw them in Jahannam? So with all this mercy, if the slave still does not try, still lives in ignorance, or blindly attaches himself to a sect instead of the Quran and Sunnah, then he will deserve Jahannam. He cannot say that he was wronged on the final day. With so much unlimited mercy being available, if a slave does not take advantage of that mercy, then he has no one to blame but himself. Therefore, as a final message to the Arabs, Allah reminds them what exactly is the straight path. If they have to follow their ancestors, if they are adamant that they will only follow their ancestors, then they might as well as follow their forefather, Ibrahim a.s., because his path was the path of Islam. He was inclined towards the truth. He never associated anything with Allah. Now, of course, here we could ask, why doesn't Allah say the path of Muhammad, peace be upon him? Isn't he the Rasul of that time? At this moment, following the path of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and following the path of Ibrahim a.s. was one and the same thing, because Muhammad, peace be upon him, had not yet introduced an extensive Sharia. This is a Makki surah. It's a surah that's only focusing on the basic morals, basic principles, Day of Judgment, Tawheed, exactly the same message of Ibrahim a.s. But yes, after migrating to Medina, when an ummah had been formed and there was an extensive Sharia, then it is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his extensive Sharia and his way of life that has to be followed over and above anyone else. Besides, don't forget that at this point in time, saying Ibrahim's name carried much more significance because the Arabs did not like Muhammad, peace be upon him. They were not accepting him, but they loved Ibrahim a.s. They all accepted him. None of them denied him. They all acknowledged that he was a prophet of God. So then at least follow him, if nothing else. He was a prophet who, just like Muhammad, peace be upon him, stated that his prayers, rites, rituals, sacrifice, living and dying was all for Allah. And yet again, this also reiterates the best means of conveying a message to an audience. Focus on areas of commonalities. If they love Ibrahim a.s. more than Muhammad, peace be upon him, then focus on Ibrahim a.s. for now. Focus on Ibrahim's message. that will soften their hearts. And then eventually, when their defense mechanism has been deactivated and they're willing to listen, then talk about Muhammad, peace be upon him, because then they will realize that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is saying the exact same thing as Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, interestingly, the Prophet is then told to state that he is the first of all the Muslims. But of course, we could ask this question, weren't the Jews who were living during the time of Musa alayhi salam also Muslims? Weren't the Christians who were living during the time of Isa alayhi salam and who were following Isa alayhi salam also Muslims? Weren't the Hanifs who were living in Arabia before Muhammad, peace be upon him, came and who only followed Ibrahim alayhi salam strictly, weren't they also Muslims? They were. But by calling himself the first Muslim, it was the Prophet acknowledging that yes, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam were all prophets of God. They were all Muslims. The people who were living in that time period and who were following them were all Muslims. But with the arrival of a new Rasul, it is necessary to now follow this new Rasul to be considered a Muslim. So now to be a Muslim means you have to believe in Muhammad, peace be upon him, as well as all the past prophets. And you have to be following Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his Sharia, and his Sunnah, and his ways of life. So in that sense, Muhammad, peace be upon him, becomes the first Muslim. This is in fact a statement given by all the Rasuls to their nations. The minute a new Rasul comes, following that new Rasul means you are now a Muslim. And if you choose to deny that Rasul, but you choose to believe in all the previous Rasuls, you are no longer a Muslim. So remember, as mentioned in the final two verses, being a Makki surah, the focus was on Tawheed and the final hour. That's why the Quran reiterates that there is only one God deserving of worship. Every soul will be accountable for his or her own actions. No bearer of burdens can bear the burden of anyone else. If a person does wrong, he will be accountable. If he does good, he will be rewarded. Everyone must return to Allah for questioning on a day when everything will be made crystal clear. With the past nations wiped out for their punishments, we have now inherited the earth as a test to see how we perform. Do we repeat the mistakes of the previous nations, in which case we should expect nothing different than what happened to them? Or will we rise above them and follow the path of Haqq? Moreover, the Arabs who were in love with their wealth, tribal status, and power were being reminded that some have more than others only as a test. Their denial of the Prophet should not come out of tribal conflict or because he belongs to a tribe that is less powerful or less wealthy than theirs. Allah does not grant some people more power and more wealth because they are royal or because they are more loved by Allah or because they are superior in any way. Some people get more power and more wealth only as a test. It's just a test. It bears no relevance to their significance in the eyes of Allah. In the eyes of Allah, a slave is not more powerful than a landlord. What matters is Iman, love for God, the desire to strive in the cause of Allah. That is what raises status. Nothing else raises your status. Besides, if being wealthy and coming from a strong royal tribe is all that matters, then what status or what royal tribe did Ibrahim alayhi salam belong to? How rich was he? How much wealth, assets, or royal power did Ismail alayhi salam have when he was left in the desert as a baby with his mother? So as the surah ends, this is a moment for us all to reflect. The verses focus on Tawheed and the Day of Judgment. Unlike the Mushrikeen Arabs, we call ourselves Muslims. We call ourselves people who love Allah and who love the Prophet. But to what extent are we following Tawheed? To what extent are we following and trying to really practice the Sunnah of the Prophet? To what extent is Islam really a significant part of our lives? Assalamu alaikum.